Chapter 1. Late morning light pooled across the whitewashed walls of the Harborcrest Cove estate, as if the sun had slipped a silk scarf over the room. Gilt frames winked. A piano gleamed like a secret no one could quite tell. The living room held its breath, and so did Aria Sullivan, as she stepped across the threshold of the house she was supposed to call home. Her palm smoothed the front of her sweater, where a small, private flutter answered back. Her other hand tightened around her purse strap with the precise economy of someone who learned young that holding on can keep you afloat. She'd driven down from Blue Water City because her best friend had canceled lunch, emergency board meeting at the nonprofit, and because Noah Calder had texted, taking a day off, around all day. A day off sounded like a place where good news could land without breaking. The laughter reached her first, high, breathy, like helium inside a secret. Then a whisper, the kind that needed an audience and hoped it didn't have one. Aria drifted forward the way she always moved when fear found her, quiet, careful, a skater pulling in their arms while the ice thinned. Long ago, in a creaking duplex in North Portland, a landlord's footsteps had been thunder, and her parents had done the arithmetic of which bill to let wait in whispers, as if softening the numbers could make them add up. Survive by making less sound than the trouble. Survive by saving face. Survive. Aria rounded the archway and the sound ended. No applause, no apology, just the clean slice of silence that only the truly caught can make. Noah's arm was draped around a woman whose hair spilled like molten copper over one shoulder, whose mouth still wore the ghost of a daring smirk. The woman's name had lived in society captions and on gossip podcasts like perfume you couldn't rinse out. Vivian Vale. She was the kind who knew where the flashbulbs were and how to arrive already bathed in them. For 3 heartbeats, the world forgot how to tick. Noah's mouth opened and closed, the gold fleck in his irises flashing a miscalculated plea. Vivian's smirk tightened into something sharp. Aria's throat made a small sound that refused to grow up into a word. She did not shout. She did not cry. She steadied herself. She blinked once as if clearing grit from her eyes, took a step back, and let the silence shoulder the weight of 1,000 accusations that would never be as clean as the quiet. Then she turned, walked out. The wood floors made no complaint. Even when Noah called her name in the voice that used to turn her bones to honey, she did not look back. Outside, Harborcrest wind came salt-sour and mean, snapping at the hem of her sweater. The pregnancy test in her purse felt heavier than metal, heavier than any sentence she could compose. She drove the coastal highway on autopilot. The Pacific flashed a bright, indifferent blade off to her right. Blue Water City rose ahead in its cluster of ambition and cranes, and Aria climbed 3 flights to the apartment where plants leaned toward windows like gossiping aunties and art prints jockeyed for space. Jules Kim's place, a small jungle of color and kindness. Jules opened the door, took one look, and pulled Aria into the kind of embrace that goes directly to the sternum and negotiates peace with the heart from there. And Aria, who had grown up stretching dollars until they peeped and sketching wildflowers in the margins of hand-me-down workbooks, broke open in her friend's living room with a shutter that started behind the ribs and kept going until it found daylight. Night fell like the city's curtain, then another. Noah's calls stacked in her phone like dominoes she refused to tip. The voicemails evolved through the predictable stages of mail-in trouble: stammered apology, spackle-thin justification, noble idiocy about how she deserved better, then the plea an octave lower. I can explain. The worst opening line for anything you want to live. On the 3rd night, Aria listened all the way through, not because the words earned it, but because she was brave enough to hear them. She answered. She agreed to meet at an all-night diner a block from Jules's, a place where burned coffee was a brand, where the checkered tile had a PhD in overhearing life. Noah arrived in a hoodie and jeans, as if he'd borrowed a disguise from the thrift store of his former self. They sat in a booth that had shipped 1,000 bad apologies and seen maybe 10 good ones. The fluorescent lights hummed like anxious bees. A teenage line cook flipped pancakes with the elan of a magician who knew his audience was small but loyal. Noah started. He said the wrong man words. He'd been tired. He'd felt out of control. Calder Logistics Group had become an animal with too many heads. He'd made a mistake, A stupid, arrogant, reckless mistake. Vivienne had been proximity dressed up as comfort, pressure masquerading as choice. He said her name like a trouble he'd already put in the rearview mirror. He said he had never stopped loving Aria. He said her name like a prayer that aimed for the ceiling and almost got there. Aria listened the way people do who intend to walk away clear, whether or not they actually walk away. When he ran out of air, she folded her hands, discovered they didn't shake. "I need time," she said, and the period at the end of it was a small law that did not require vote or counsel. The words settled on the tabletop between the coffee rings and the sugar caddy like something alive. She almost told him then. She almost said, "A heartbeat inside me wakes before dawn and flutters like a trapped bird desperate for light." But she moved the words back down her throat. Not here, not under the diner's neon bug zapper buzz and the scent of butter and apology. Not where hard news could be mistaken for a bargaining chip. So she said nothing else, and he nodded as if the world had slid a little. They went home alone, days blurred. Aria slept on Jules's couch under a quilt that looked like it had been sewn from all the bright leftovers of good days. Then she spent 2 nights at her parents' narrow house in a suburb where the buses arrived on the minute and retirement plans did math in the kitchen. Her mother simmered soup like a ritual. Her father, still working the kinks from his left arm after a minor stroke, lifted her spirits the way he used to lift her bike when the chain jumped. Slow, careful, sure. When Aria told her mother she was pregnant, Lena Sullivan lit up like the kitchen's old pendant lamp had got an upgraded bulb. Aria did not mention Vivienne. Grief had boundaries. She would learn to put up the tape. The knock came on Jules's door on a late afternoon tucked into a cardigan. Vivienne Val stood in the hallway wearing sunglasses and a coat the exact color of someone else's money. She took off the shades with the small ceremony of an actress leaving set. To her credit, she did not posture. "I'm sorry," she said, and the apology had blood in it. "I let something ugly set up house in me. He said things that made me think I mattered. But when you walked in, he told me to go. He said you were the only one." Aria did not expect that. The words landed in a clearing that fury had burned, and flowers did not exactly spring up, but air got in. "Why tell me this?" "Because I'm leaving," Vivienne said, which was what all ghosts promised before haunting. "Chicago. My sister has a spare room and taste in carpets I resent. I wrote you a letter. You can read it or burn it. Both would be on brand." She placed an envelope on the coffee table like it might be rigged, then turned. At the door, something bright and unvarnished flickered in her gaze. "He loves you," she said, voice softer than her eyeliner. "It's inconvenient, but there it is." The door closed. Aria stared at the envelope for a long time. She opened it. The handwriting was precise and small. The sentences careened like kids at a Saturday soccer game. Apologies tripped over confessions and tugged excusations down by the sleeve. It didn't absolve. It didn't try to. It did something somehow more useful. It proved the universe refused to cast only villains and saints. 2 days later, Aria texted Noah and chose Riverlight Commons, neutral ground patrolled by ducks who minded their business and toddlers who did not. The late light braided through the trees. She touched a hand to her belly the way you cup a flame so the wind can't bully it out. "I'm pregnant," she said. Noah's breath hitched. Tears surprised him like a sudden squall that no forecast had caught. He reached for her hand like it was his first good idea. He didn't say, "This fixes everything." He said, "I'm sorry you carried it alone." And that sentence was the first good thing he'd said in 3 weeks. He promised therapy. He promised fewer flights, fewer trophies. He promised presence like it was a verb. He asked to come to appointments. He offered to sit anywhere she needed, even outside her life, while she figured out what need meant. She believed pieces of it. Pieces were enough to start. From there, they committed to the ugly work that comes after renovation shows cut to black. Plaster dust in lungs, lists on lists, discoveries that the rot went farther than you hoped and not as far as you feared. Noah scaled Calder Logistics Group back from empire to company, a semantic downgrade that looked like restraint on the ground. He told his partner, Marcus Reed, to take the travel, handed off the European expansion to someone with a passport and boundaries. He learned how to say no without explaining his whole soul. He showed up to ultrasounds like a man who expected to be turned away. He cried when he heard the heartbeat, a horse far in a field, running. The tabloids, professional arsonists that they are, lit matches at the edges hoping for wind. A blog ran a grainy street photo of Noah leaving a restaurant next to a woman with smoke curl hair. New flame? The headline screamed in capital letters that had never met self-respect. The woman's name was Priya Desai, a venture capitalist whose idea of romance was a spreadsheet with color-coded tabs. Noah insisted he'd met her for a potential partner deal. She hugged me goodbye, he said, as if that sentence hadn't broken civilizations. Aria did not reply for 30 hours because silent thinking is a right. Then Priya knocked on the Sullivan-Calder door wearing a navy suit with a near-military crease. Nothing happened, Priya said crisply. He was boring. Please prevent your local rumor mill from trying to make me interesting. Unvarnished practicality had a way of cutting Trouble's hair. Aria laughed in spite of herself. It broke the room open for 5 seconds and let oxygen in. Then the plot pivoted, because life dislikes tidy arcs. The call came near midnight. Unknown number. A voice frayed by distance and weather. Aria, Vivian said, breath hitching. I'm in Chicago. I overheard something. People plotting in a hotel lounge because villains love leather furniture. They want to ruin Noah. Rumors, forged documents, the works. The name I heard was Damien Cade. Damien Cade, Noah's investor, who smiled like a switchblade and had been agitating for expansions, Noah wouldn't bless. He liked risk the way toddlers like glitter, everywhere into everything. Thank you, Aria said, a sentence she never expected to give Vivian in this lifetime. She called Noah and told him everything. He went quiet the way people do when they recognize the opposite of luck by its gait. I believe it, he said. Cade's been itching to push me out. He thinks calculated risk is a PR term, not a math problem. The iron in his voice returned, tempered now. I'll handle it. What came next didn't fit on glossy pages. It was doc review and strategy meetings, and pizza boxes stacked like terrible Jenga. It was Jules calling in the debt of a dozen fundraisers to get a top crisis attorney on a Sunday. It was Marcus walking the board through chain of custody logs, like a patient meteorologist explaining that, yes, rain is wet. It was Aria staying up late while Noah built a case for unfairness that turned out to be criminality, wearing a suit 2 sizes too proper. When proof surfaced, falsified spreadsheets, emails with casual felonies in the subject line, Damien Cade practiced the venerable art of announcing a sabbatical for self-care. He stepped down. The company weathered the storm, not because it was invincible, but because, for once, 2 people who had been on opposite sides of trust put their shoulders to the same door and pushed. Something in Noah changed direction and refused to change back. He rerouted money to Jules's scholarship fund. He showed up to volunteer days in old jeans. He boiled pasta wrong but with devotion. He started leaving his phone in a ceramic bowl by the front door like a pilgrim leaving an offering. He wore humility like a jacket he'd not known he owned and found. To his surprise, it fit. Aria's life found rhythm that had nothing to do with society pages. Mornings at the Harbor Light Arts Center, where she taught kids how to turn cardboard into rocket ships and fear into color. Afternoons writing short stories about small bravery and second chances and how spring light finds dusty rooms and throws confetti anyway. Her mother dropped off soup. Her father brought a screwdriver and a to-do list, then wandered around fixing things that did not, strictly speaking, need fixing, which was the point. In the quiet evenings, Aria lay on the couch, felt 2 heels tap at her from the inside, and whispered, "We're okay," believing it more days than she didn't. Healing was work, not spellcraft. Some nights, Aria startled awake and saw a copper curtain of hair behind her eyelids like a threat. Some nights Noah stared at the ceiling, his mistakes screening in an unwanted marathon. They didn't promise forever. They promised tomorrow morning. If you keep that promise enough days in a row, someone calls it a life. Spring swept in with theatrics. Win like a stagehand who likes their job too much. On a Friday, bright enough to be rude, Aria's back ached in a rhythm that organized itself into something ancient by noon. Jules drove them to Mercy Harbor Medical, while Noah, who had planned a call, canceled his calendar with 2 swipes and exactly 0 apologies. In the hospital room, machines hummed an industrial lullaby, and strangers became family, because that is the job application they signed when they chose medicine. Aria squeezed Noah's hand, said words she would not remember, and made sounds older than language. Noah swore, apologized for swearing, laughed because fear and joy are siblings who borrow each other's clothes. Hours lengthened and folded back on themselves like dough. One more, the doctor said, voice both command and kindness. Aria found a detonator inside herself and pressed it. Silence fell in the split second before a cry broke it open like daylight splitting curtains on a bad dream. "It's a girl!" The words landed in a room that had already rearranged itself to make space for her. They laid the baby on Aria's chest. Slick, furious, undeniable. Noah leaned over, tears finding his face without asking permission, and whispered, "Hi." He looked at Aria like the map had shrunk to these two people, and that was a miracle, not a loss. "Hi, Isla-son." That first night smelled like lemon cleaner and second chances. Noah dozed upright, hand on the swaddled bundle, as if he could be a levee. Aria drifted, waking to watch the baby's chest rise and fall, to notice that grief does not leave when joy arrives. It sits down, moves over, shares the blanket. She reached to touch Noah's cheek and found the sandpaper of a day that didn't care about razors. He opened his eyes. "I won't waste this," he said. "Not a minute." She believed him. And belief, she discovered, was a muscle that after months of rehab finally lifted itself without shaking. Reality, punctual as always, returned on day 2. Noah stepped into the hall to take a call. He came back carrying a face he'd used sparingly in the last few months, the one for news that didn't have a category yet. "Say it," Aria said, not unkind. "There's a gallery curator," he said. "Celine Archer, met her once at a donor thing. She has files. She connected with Cade's assistant. She wants money and a statement, or she feeds it to the wolves." "Blackmail," Aria said, naming the thing so it would stop pretending. She looked at Isla, asleep, her brow crumpled like she was skeptical about Earth. "We don't pay blackmail. We do this right." Right turned out to be complicated and, predictably, legal. Noah called Marcus, who called counsel. Jules called a reporter she trusted for off-the-record advice that felt like a compass in a fog bank. They mapped options and chose the path that would stand in daylight. Meanwhile, Noah's friend Daniel Remington, the kind of man who always knew a guy, and if he didn't, knew how to invent knowing, offered to dig. "Daniel can dig," Aria said from her hospital bed, queenly in her paper gown. "If he brings up anything illegal, we put it back and wash our hands. Twice, with a nail brush." Daniel dug with both hands. He found Celine's old posts cheering a European collector whose ethics had been politely described as impressionistic. He found back-channel messages, the kind sent at 2:17 a.m. from accounts people think are anonymous because they chose cartoon avatars. He found an NDA she'd made an intern sign the same week she forgot to pay them. It amounted to an unflattering mirror. Noah texted Celine from a number she didn't have and asked for coffee in a very public cafe. "We're done," he typed, mutually. The cafe served coffee that took 3 minutes to explain and 15 seconds to drink. Edison bulbs made everything look like an apology even before it was one. Celine wore sunglasses the size of a small state. "You wasted my time," she said, which is a power move if it lands. This one didn't. Noah slid an envelope across the table. Not cash. Copies, notes, polite consequences. Celine read, glanced up, glanced down. "We could both bleed," she said, bored more than angry. "But I'm busy." "Same," Noah said. The barista's milk steamer screamed like a backing vocalist. They left it there, a détente built on mutual disinterest and the realization that neither of them wished to attend the other's bonfire. The scandal didn't break. The wolves went to find other forests. There were still jump scares, an anonymous voicemail forwarded to Aria's inbox with no note, the 2 a.m., adrenaline spike when headlights slowed outside their building. But the frequency dropped. Noah showed his lawyers everything. Aria showed him the message and watched his face for the flinch of a liar. It didn't come. They brought Isla home. An ounce of baby weighed more than any mistake. Nights hopscotched. Aria wrote in her head while rocking the baby, sentences like river stones she rolled with her thumb. Noah learned to swaddle with military precision. He made bottles like a chemist. He started leaving post-its on Aria's mirror. Day 12, "You are the CEO of mitochondria." Day 21, "If sleep is a myth, call me a folklorist." Day 37, "Today I will pronounce colic without swearing." Tough goals. They started therapy on Tuesday mornings in an office with a glass water pitcher and tissues within arm's reach. Aria said things she'd been saving because they sounded ungrateful near success. She said she felt invisible when the company swallowed Noah whole. She said the silence after the betrayal tasted like pennies. She said a version of herself had nearly bought a bus ticket to a town with one traffic light and a library that still stamped cards. Noah didn't defend. He sat in the heat, owned what he'd broken, and brought tools instead of excuses. Habits grew that held. Sunday afternoons at the community center, gluing cardboard, paint under their nails, like evidence that better messes exist. Morning walks with Isla asleep in the stroller while the ocean hurled itself at the rocks just to prove it could. Evenings on their small balcony facing the city's bruised purple skyline, mugs of mint tea, so many words saved for when they mattered. Sometimes they peppered the quiet with memes. "This is fine," Aria would deadpan. Noah would snort into his mug, and the steam would bead his eyelashes like a special effect. Not everything softened on cue. Trust, like scar tissue, grows lumpy and does not ask permission before it tightens. A ghost appointment titled Dinner Damien surfaced on Noah's calendar, a remnant he'd forgotten to delete. Aria's breath snagged. "It's a ghost," he said, palms out, showing her details, his face open as a door. The knot in her chest loosened an inch. Months widened. Marcus reorganized Calder, so no single person could play king again. Noah's name detached from the almost headlines with a soft pop. He joined the board of Jules's nonprofit and handed out programs like an enthusiastic usher who'd been promoted to humility. Aria's short story collection, a love letter to small bravery, found a home at an indie press where the receptionist recognized her name from a workshop 10 years ago and squealed mid-voicemail. That evening, Noah made pancakes with bear-shaped ambition and stick-figure execution. "Abstract," he declared. One night, while the city dressed up to go nowhere, Aria and Noah carried tea onto the balcony. The air had that edge that made you believe in sweaters again. Below, headlights stitched the streets. "Do you ever think about Harborcrest?" Aria asked, not to reopen the wound, but to honor the miles since. "Every day," Noah said. The word didn't shrink. "In some way." "I didn't say anything," she said. "That day. I thought it meant I was weak. Now I think I was saving words for when they could do work. I'm grateful you didn't spend them on a room that wasn't listening." He kissed her hair. The city glittered like it wanted in on the conversation. They watched a gull carve the sky like a signature. 2 floors up, laughter burst at a sitcom joke that had made the world tour. Somewhere down the block, a siren rose and fell like a breathing exercise. Ordinary life, which was the prize. Later, in the nursery painted the color of the end of rain, Noah stood over the crib and whispered promises without tinsel. He promised dinner more often than not, mistakes followed by repairs, presents that stayed after apologies. He promised to raise a daughter who understood that love was choreography, not fireworks. Steps you learn, trip, relearn, perform daily for an audience of 2 and a stuffed bunny. He promised to forgive himself just enough to keep going, which may be the bravest choreography of all. Isla hiccuped in her sleep, unimpressed by vows. Aria leaned in the doorway, arms folded, smiling like someone who had climbed out of a canyon and discovered the view was worth the burned calves. Chapter 2. Aria's book arrived with a cardboard sigh on a Thursday, a stack of modest spines that looked both smaller and heavier than she'd expected. The cover was a wash of dusty blue with a hand-drawn constellations map. The title, Small Braveries, sat in a typeface that would have made her 10-year-old self cry. Jules framed the first copy like a diploma. Noah, playing it cool and failing, set up a tiny launch gathering at Fireside Books where the floorboards creaked like a chorus, and Lemon Oil fought a noble losing battle against dust. People Aria loved, and a handful she liked only on Instagram, crowded among the shelves. Jules did the intro and deployed exactly 2 embarrassing stories, the agreed-upon maximum, about Aria confusing yarrow with Queen Anne's lace and accidentally starting a neighborhood trend for wildflower identification walks. Marcus arrived in a blazer that tried hard and didn't. Aria read a story about a woman learning to breathe again without apologizing for the oxygen, and in the 3rd paragraph, Noah's eyes went shiny and he didn't bother to hide it. Afterward, A teenager with bitten nails and a sweater that had been other sweaters before, it was this one approached, cleared her throat like permission, and said, "That line about keeping your voice company when no one else does? That was, like, I don't know. It felt like someone turned on a light." Aria went home with a feeling she avoided naming because blessed felt like a caption, but some moments deserved no apology. The city, meanwhile, kept being itself. Cranes scribbling on the skyline, food trucks drawing lines, a new mural blooming overnight on a warehouse like a dare. Calder Logistics breathed easier, not because it had less work, but because hubris had been benched. The incoming CEO of Boring, as Noah jokingly nominated himself, found unexpected joy in spreadsheet cells that balanced and employees who went home at 6 on purpose. And then the season did what it does: changed the light, shifted the air, called for sweaters, and offered them back. If not for the raccoon, everything might have stayed on schedule. The raccoon was the size of a duffel bag and believed, with the certitude of a politician, that their kitchen compost bin was a sovereign nation he had been elected to govern. At 2:43 a.m. on a windless Wednesday, he launched what can only be described as a coup. Up the fire escape, through the window, Arya had left a hair unlatched after an ill-timed pie-cooling moment, directly into the pantry where night snacks go to dream. Arya woke to a sound like a very committed burglar trying to unwrap a family-sized bag of kettle chips. She nudged Noah. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. The sound paused, something considered. Then the sound resumed with exactly the energy of, "Hold my beer." Noah sat up. "Stay," he said, in the tone of a man who, moments earlier, had been dreaming about a beach with no email. He slipped into sweatpants and grabbed the nearest weapon-like object, which turned out to be a plush giraffe. He brandished it with killer instinct and zero economic impact. The raccoon did not believe in private property or personal space. It turned, masked disdainful, and lifted both paws in a gesture translated as, "You in what army?" Noah yelped, quietly. They were parents now, stumbled back, and slammed the pantry door. Arya tried not to laugh and failed, softly, which offended the raccoon on a molecular level. Isla, whose relationship with sleep was adventurous, decided the moment called for an encore and began to wail. "Okay," Noah panted over the crying. "New plan. Operation Raccoon Eviction." They texted Daniel, because of course Daniel knew a guy. Within 10 minutes, a man whose business card actually read Wildlife Diplomat arrived with a humane trap, 2 apple slices, and the calm of a monk who had seen worse. The raccoon left their apartment looking personally insulted by their lack of snacks and lodged an official complaint with the night sky. Arya and Noah dissolved into that exhausted brand of laughter that moves things in a body: grief to the corner, fear to a bench, joy onto the couch. For 3 days, the raccoon was family lore. Jules brought a tiny raccoon plush for Ela with a note, "For your first scandal." Marcus emailed HR to update their emergency plan. Fire, earthquake, leaked earnings report, raccoons. Life resumed. Isla discovered that she had hands and that they could make fists when justice required. Arya learned to type with one thumb while the other hand held a bottle, and her work grew a new suppleness, as if fatigue had sanded off posturing. Noah, who had previously considered grocery shopping a game played by people with time, became the champion of exactly 3 recipes. He messaged the group chat after one triumph. "Behold, pasta aha!" Alfredo, Arya texted. "Whatever. Taste, 810. Smoke alarm, 0. Somewhere in the middle of the sweetness, trouble reheated itself like leftover pizza, less crisp, still edible to chaos. An anonymous account posted a thread on X, the site formerly known as You-Know-What, suggesting that Calder's miraculous crisis survival had involved dark money, hushed payouts, and a mysterious woman with copper hair doing errands at odd hours. The comments were an anthology of people who had never met a nuance they didn't want to punch. Jules texted, "Do I unleash the nonprofit aunties? They will create a care and correct thread with citations and banana bread." Arya stared at the thread as if it might decide to behave. "We don't elevate it," she said to Noah, though she wanted to throw her phone into the ocean and make a wish like a fairy tale with cell towers. "We document it. We call it what it is, nonsense with cut-and-paste bravado." Noah's jaw worked. "I'll call council." "Call council," Arya agreed. "And then let's go to the park. Isla needs to see ducks again so she remembers the world is also ducks. They chose every day that followed with that kind of intentionality, as if carefulness were a candle to carry through a wind corridor. Therapy, tea, ducks. Small yeses, Aria called them. She kept a list on the fridge to remind herself that good things didn't have to trend to count. 1. Found a soft sweater at the thrift store for $8. 2. Jules's banana bread used the right bananas. 3. Ela made a noise like a tiny dragon attempting diplomacy. 4. The ocean did its thing today. Noah added items that ranged from genuine to unhinged. 12. Did not yell at ad for socks that promised to fix my life. 13. Put phone in bowl by door. Did not accuse bowl of stealing it later. 14. Didn't stalk my own company on Glassdoor. 15. Learned Isla's I'm bored face versus I'm composing an opera face. 16. Remembered to breathe. If you're waiting for the real bomb to drop, so were they. It didn't arrive like a bomb. It knocked politely, the way true trouble sometimes does when it has nowhere else to be. A courier delivered a small parcel addressed to Aria in old-fashioned pen and ink, the loops in the letters so exact they felt like a threat pretending to be a compliment. Inside, a flash drive tucked into velvet, the kind of presentation that suggested the sender feared tackiness more than prison. A note, you should know who you love. A friend. Aria looked at the drive like it might bite. She didn't plug it in. She didn't throw it away. She called Jules, who called Daniel, who called his guy, who arrived with a forensic laptop that looked like it had eaten other laptops and grown strong. They opened the drive as if diffusing something that could explode and release not shrapnel, but narrative. On it, a handful of photos. Noah at a bar with someone whose face was cut off by the crop. A scanned receipt from a hotel bar in Austin, circled in red like a B-grade thriller. A screenshot of an email thread between Noel Colton, which, was Noah if you asked a bad alias generator, and V discussing deliverables at the Harborcrest property. It was sloppy. It was meant to look clean. Cheap forgery, Daniel declared, leaning back. The email headers are Frankensteined. The metadata is tragic. Whoever made this thinks metadata is the villain in a YA novel. Aria's heart had sprinted at the first photo. Now it slowed, irritable. Who sent it? Someone who writes like they drink expensive coffee and hate fun, Jules said, peering at the loops in the letters. My money's on Cade's assistant's friend's friend. Or Celine, Daniel said, because Chaos loves a recurring character, or a hobbyist with a grudge and a Canva account. They called counsel, documented the hell out of everything, and decided to do something wild. Go to sleep. Aria lay awake anyway, watching light from the street stitch the ceiling, composing 1,000 future rebuttals in her mind. She reached for the small person snuffling in the bassinet, the weight of Ela's hand on her own thumb, and astronomy she understood. The next morning, because the universe appreciates comedic timing, the Harborcrest HOA announced new regulations about unauthorized wildlife interactions on the community group chat, after someone uploaded ring cam footage of a raccoon in the building's recycling room. The comment section devolved into finger-pointing, pun-offs, and a neighbor named Brad who insisted raccoons were just libertarian cats. Aria laughed alone at the kitchen counter until she cried, because sometimes weeping arrives disguised, and you let it in because it's polite and needs a sandwich. Some days, chaos can't find you when you're at the farmer's market debating arugula. They found Aria anyway, but by then she had, annoyingly, grown hard to move. The indie press gave her a date for a Blue Water City reading, the one with a little more spotlight and a lot more people who used words the way some people used knives. The night arrived. Aria wore a dress that made her feel like a lighthouse. Simple, bright, unafraid of storms. Noah stood in the back like a loyal usher again, hands in pockets to keep from clapping at the wrong time. Jules worked the small table of books like she was running a campaign for better, softer literature. During Q&A, a woman with a smart haircut and a smile she'd probably been complimented for too often stood. Do you think stories about second chances romanticize bad behavior? She asked, tone polite enough to sting. Like, are we training people to accept the unacceptable because we prefer redemption arcs to righteous exits? The room tilted, waiting for Aria to wobble. She did not. I think, Aria said, we should differentiate between forgiveness and amnesia. Between staying and staying the same. I don't write survivals where the fireworks go off and everybody has perfect teeth. I write what I know. Imperfect people doing unglamorous work because they believe the life on the other side is worth it. I also write exits. I've left rooms I loved because staying would have made me smaller. We could all use better stories about both. A small murmur went through the room, the sound of air returning. Afterward, a man in a navy sport coat introduced himself as the host of a podcast with a title like In the Trenches, or Under the Hood, or Doing the Work, which were all essentially the same idea, wearing different hats. Would you come on and talk about the mechanics of healing, he asked. Our listeners like verbs. Aria said yes, not because she liked microphones, but because if a sentence she said could help someone grit their teeth for one more therapy appointment, it deserved to exist in the world unshy. On the way home, late-night Blue Water glittered like a story that had made better choices. Noah interlaced their fingers at a red light. Proud of you, he said, simple as bread. Back at the apartment, the bowl by the front door accepted their phones like a dignified valet. They stepped onto the balcony with mugs of tea. A neighbor's wind chime gave a lazy shrug. Down the block, a rideshare driver did a 3-point turn that required the patience of saints. Still in? Noah asked. No swagger, just hope, the question he'd learned to ask without assuming the answer. Still in, Aria said, one morning at a time. She didn't say the second part out loud. They had learned that the vow made its own weather. The second attack did not come from Kay, Celine, or a mysterious anonymous friend with calligraphy. It came from grief, predictable, old, domestic. It came on Isla's 6-week birthday when Arya's father tried to lift the stroller into the trunk with his left hand and dropped it. Not a tragedy, not even a scare, just a slip with the sound of metal nicking metal, and then he sagged against the car like a flag in windless weather and said, with no performative bravery, I'm tired this year. Arya had words for almost everything. She did not have words for the roll call of small losses in a parent. She held her father's good arm and tucked him into the back seat and listened to her mother talk cheerfully the way you talk when you're trying to steer everyone toward brighter shoreline. The world did not end. It posted a reminder on her calendar, finite, 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 with a heart emoji, because she was ridiculous. That night, Arya stood in the nursery where the paint color insisted that rain had ended recently and would again. Noah kissed Ela's forehead with reverence, and then, because comedy is necessary, blew a gentle raspberry that earned him his first real baby giggle, an astonished, delighted sound like a bubble trying to become a song. Arya laughed with her whole torso. It was the exact medicine required. They kept going. They went to therapy. They answered texts. They let people help. They said yes to a backyard barbecue where Marcus burned the corn on purpose, and the playlist got stuck on a sunny 2012 loop that made everyone nostalgic for a time when the worst thing on the internet was a sneezing panda. They forgot to take a picture and took that as a sign they'd been present. It would be neat to say that after this, all storms retreated, that the world saw it had failed to break them and moved on to easier prey. But neat is for linens and movie endings with test audiences. Real life kept its mess. They kept their small yeses. When an old photo surfaced in Arya's phone memories feature and made her breath snag, she forwarded it to Jules with the caption, "Scream into the void?" Jules replied with 9 emojis and a TikTok of a goose scaring a grown man into reevaluating his choices. It helped. Months widened, and then the knock came again, and this time it wore a suit and a smile and a card that said Aurora Pierce, Consultant, which was not the name on the script, but life doesn't care for casting. "Hi," the woman said on their doorstep, posture perfect, eyes like a polished stone. "I'd like to talk about mutual reputational interests." Arya's first instinct was to ask if the bowl by the door could eat this woman whole. Her second was to invite her in because she came from people who offered tea to chaos and hoped it would sip slowly. 5 minutes, she said. Aurora, not Celine, not Vivienne, removed her coat the way people do who have never lost at musical chairs. I consult for donors and galleries. I also consult for myself when I decide someone is being sloppy with my industry. I came across some material that suggests an investor named Damien Cade has been making creative claims about Mr. Calder. It would look better on you than him if it came out the right way. Arya studied her in the narrow foyer. What are you asking? A conversation. Aurora said with the calm of a person who has never had to return a blouse without the receipt. A head start, a small exclusivity window for narrative framing, say 36 hours, before I share materials more broadly. Noah's voice from the kitchen, we don't do exclusives with people we don't know. His tone wasn't sharp. It was tired of games. Aurora smiled like a cat that understood glassware. Your call. I'll send a link, she said, leaving a card that probably had a tracking chip in the ink. She left, the hall obligingly narrowing in her wake. Aria looked at Noah. Do we call council again? We call council, he said. And then we eat the pasta I didn't burn this time. They did both. The link Aurora sent included precisely the materials Daniel had unearthed, plus a new tranche that implicated Cade in something so obnoxiously illegal it wore a neon sign. Counsel used phrases like potential leverage and chain of custody and pressable charges if we decide to go that route. Noah used phrases like I'm so tired of this and also I will not run. Aria used a spoon to scoop sauce over pasta and said amen in a tone that wasn't a prayer so much as a contract. Aurora, to her credit or discredit, did not press. Perhaps because she had already made a different bargain with a different narrative. Perhaps because she was busy. They didn't find out. Calm returned the way it always does. Piecemeal, underwhelming, like someone reassembling your life IKEA style without losing all the screws. On a Tuesday that had no special desire to be remembered, Aria carried Ela to the balcony for her first sunrise. The city did what it does best, tried to be beautiful. Noah joined them with coffee. The wind moved just enough to remind them it existed. Hey, Noah said, soft like a knock on an open door. Hey, Aria answered. Still in? He asked, not because he doubted, but because asking had become part of being in. Still in, Aria said. She kissed the top of Isla's head, which had begun to smell like something new and indefinably brave. She looked at Noah, who had learned to speak without flinching. She looked at the horizon, which kept its secrets and its promises in equal measure. Ordinary life, which is the prize, rose anyway. Chapter 3, by autumn, Harborcrest Cove had decided to be photogenic again. As if the summer's rumors had been a costume party it needed to sleep off. The HOA group chat moved on from wildlife diplomacy to a ferocious debate about whether a communal little free library required a permit. Aria watched, delighted, as Jules submitted a 3-page proposal including a sketch, a color palette, sea sage and quiet coral, and a fundraising plan that included a bake sale and a readathon, where participants pledged to read books they already owned. The plan passed because no one wanted to be the villain in a narrative about books and baked goods. Noah found himself learning the difference between being busy and being necessary. Calder Logistics operated, he didn't have to operate it. He sat in more listening than talking, which was new and quietly delicious. Marcus, whose posture suggested he slept 8 hours most nights, introduced a no heroics policy in operations. No more last-minute saves that burn people down for the sake of optics. We are a company, he said in an all-hands, not a reality show. A low cheer traveled the room the way relief sometimes does, sideways. Aria worked mornings at the Harborlight Art Center, where a kindergartner named Milo declared glue sticks sticky swords, and asked for extra paper because some pictures need practice. In the afternoons, she wrote. Sometimes at the kitchen table, sometimes at the community center's quiet corner, where the Wi-Fi was polite and the light was flattering enough to make sadness look like a filter it could take off later. Her second collection began to show its bones. Essays braided with stories, a long piece about the economic math of forgiveness that refused to end until it did. Therapy kept its Tuesday slot. Some weeks they arrived full of words. Some weeks they sighed like deflating balloons and stared at the tissue box like it might provide snacks. Their therapist, a woman named Aura, with hair like a waterfall and glasses that transformed her face from companionable to watch out, held them steady. Progress isn't a staircase, she reminded them. It's a spiral. Keep rounding the corner. They celebrated small holidays with enthusiasm bordering on camp. On National Pancake Day, Noah attempted a pancake that looked like a whale and named it Moby-ish. On World Kindness Day, Aria left 4 packs of stickers in random library books, like she was Santa's more practical cousin. On their anniversary of not breaking up, they bought 2 inexpensive rings from a local maker, the the kind that bend a little and don't mind doing so, and pressed them onto each other's fingers in the living room while Isla tried to eat a stuffed carrot. They said vows that were shorter and better than anything they'd said at their wedding. I will tell you when I'm scared. I will ask you to tell me when you are. I will choose us when it's boring. Because the universe respects commitment to bit, trouble RSVP'd. It arrived dressed as Damien Cade's reemergence on a business channel, smug in a suit, alligator smile shimmering under studio lights. He discussed market trends and the necessity of bold expansion with an anchor who had never met a follow-up question. A lower third graphic announced his new fund, fresh capital shimmering like bait. He did not say Noah's name, but he mentioned leaders who shrink in storms with theater kid relish. Aria watched on mute while Isla gummed a giraffe and decided that a voodoo doll would be tacky. Noah turned off the TV with the finality of a door shot twice. He's free, he said. It was not self-pity. For now, Aria said. Weather changes. And then a funny thing happened. Nothing for a long time. Or rather, nothing that makes headlines. Their friends had babies and breakups and breakthroughs. The raccoon returned briefly to glare through the window like an ex who resented their happiness, then left to file a complaint elsewhere. Aria's father started physical therapy twice a week and discovered that stubbornness could be channeled. He announced to Ela that he planned to attend her high school graduation, which earned him applause from his granddaughter's sock. On a Tuesday that pretended to be any other, Aria received an email from a school in Harborcrest asking whether she'd consider leading a creativity lab once a week for sixth graders whose hearts beat too loud for their science class, and whose science class bored them for reasons they could not express without turning into trouble. She said yes, because once upon a time someone had looked at her sketchbook and said, "That's not doodling, that's mapping." The lab proved to be a controlled chaos of spirit glue and self-awareness. A girl named Tanya wrote a story about a robot that learned to be angry and be safe, in that order. A boy named Raoul painted a storm and then fed it cotton balls and declared it fixed. Aria remembered how many rescues arrived disguised as assignments. It might have all stayed this steady, if not for the fundraiser. Jules's nonprofit, Sea Glass, which ran after-school programs and paid a living wage to the people who made children believe they were more than schedules, held its annual gala, which was less gala than community dinner with optimism, but gala invited better donors. The theme was Build the Bridge, and the centerpieces were small cardboard bridges designed by the kids, which, due to technical limitations and boundless imagination, looked like if Frank Gehry collaborated with a dragon. Aria wore a dress that had pockets deep enough to hold snacks, opinions, and a backup pacifier. Noah wore a suit that fit like a second chance. Jules wore a jumpsuit and leadership. Marcus wore a tie that had heard of fun. The room buzzed with good intentions and the sound of people seeing each other. Vivian Val arrived late. Of course she did. She wore a black dress that admitted it had crushed other dresses to get here. She did not make a scene, which was the scene. She smiled at Aria with a quiet that had unfolded since Chicago and took a seat nearest the exit, like a person who had learned to leave rooms before rooms left her. During dessert, the lights dimmed for the short video Sea Glass had commissioned from a kid with a borrowed camera and a gift. It was nimble and honest and avoided pity the way good work does. As the applause faded, a hand went up at the back of the room. Aurora Pierce stood, hair symmetrical, lips glossed to the exact right shine. "Quick comment," she said, and the word quick did the heavy lifting of misleading. "I applaud your mission," Aurora began. "I do, but in the spirit of transparency, will Sea Glass be addressing the ethical concerns about its major donors' business practices?" Aria felt the room contract like a diaphragm unprepared. Noah's hand found her knee under the table, anchored but not clinging. Jules, to her everlasting credit, smiled with teeth and tenderness. "Absolutely," she said, her tone the one you use to tell a child's parent that you see their kid entirely. Sea Glass accepts donations only from sources that pass both legal and ethical review. Last year, we returned a significant gift when new information surfaced. We publish our donor list on our website along with the categories of support. We also invite anyone with specific concerns to meet with our board. Since you have the mic, Miss Pierce, do you have a specific donor in mind? Aurora smiled, the kind of smile that requires a dark room to hand it back. I do, she said, and the name tasted like rust in Arya's mouth before Aurora said it. Calder Logistics. The room didn't gasp, thank God. But a murmur moved through the tables like a rumor looking for a soft place to sit. Arya inhaled, exhaled, prepared to stand. Jules beat her to it. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify, she said. Seaglass requested and received documentation from Calder Logistics about past allegations and the subsequent audit. We also requested independent verification from 2 separate firms and a letter from the AG's office confirming that there are no ongoing investigations. Our board voted to accept Calder's support after those reviews. If information changes, our stance changes. That's our policy, and we live by it. If you have new information, Miss Pierce, I'm sure our counsel would welcome it in writing. Jules didn't smile then. She let the facts sit at the table and show their work. It worked. The room exhaled. Aurora nodded as if she had merely inquired about the vegan option. Of course, she said. Transparency helps everyone. She sat. The dessert course remembered itself. Vivian slipped out during the auction, which was fine, which was good. Arya felt something in her spine relax a centimeter. Noah rubbed his thumb along the seam of her palm, a small metronome. They raised more money than projected because people prefer to give where a truth has been told in the hard voice. Seaglass would build the bridge. Kids would cross it with cardboard armor and glitter helmets. Jules cried into a cloth napkin and accused the napkin of being unhelpful. Afterwards, in the parking lot, Aurora waited by a car that probably had massage settings in the seats. No hard feelings? She said, surprising Aria because she'd expected only sharp ones. I value organizations that can articulate their positions out loud. I value people who bring concerns to boardrooms instead of microphones, Aria said, not cruelly, but if a microphone is what gets you to care, we'll make do. Aurora slid on her sunglasses and smiled at some future she'd been promised. The boardrooms will always send me back to the microphones, she said, and drove off. Noah snorted. We should send her a little free library, he said. Full of ethics textbooks, Aria suggested. Full of board games, Noah countered. Monopoly, but with social contracts. Way boring, Aria said, grinning. They went home to a sleeping baby who believed nighttime was a respected institution again. Aria stood over the crib and thought about how people like to act like the world changed in speeches and scandals. The truth? It changed in rooms like this one, with nightlights and vows and ridiculous sock puppets. The last flare arrived like a coda, unexpected only because they had started to expect quiet. A text at 6:21 a.m., a number Aria didn't have. Aria, this is Vivienne. I know you owe me nothing, but there's something you should see. It's about Cade. Coffee? Aria stared at the screen long enough for Noah to lean over her shoulder, hair sleep stupid. Do you want me to go? He asked, voice still wrapped in the night. I want to go, Aria said, with eyes open. They met at a coffee shop with plants in macrame slings and baristas who knew the difference between pretending to listen and listening. Vivienne had cut her hair. It made her look like someone who had decided she did not owe the world the same face every day. He's starting a pack, Vivienne said without preamble, sliding a folder across the table. Documents, emails, a strategy memo with bullet points that made Aria's stomach tilt. Cade wanted to rebrand himself as the job creator who hates red tape. He planned to buy local races, then leverage favors for permits, contracts, megaphones. There were pieces about undermining nonprofits that wouldn't play along. Seaglass was on a list. So was the Community Arts Center. So was, hilariously, the Harborcrest raccoon diplomacy team. How did you? Aria began. I went on a date with a person who thinks he's a Bond villain, Vivienne said. He left his laptop open while he explained blockchain to a ficus. Aria, who had expected melodrama, felt something calmer and colder. Thank you. I don't know if you tell a reporter or a council member or the librarian, Vivienne said. I'm leaving town again, for real this time. I don't trust myself to stay honest around this much glass, but I trust you to do something that won't look like a firework at first. Aria slid the folder into her bag. Do you need fruit? People who are leaving need fruit, Vivienne laughed. No one has ever offered me fruit as a parting gift, she said. Now I'm offended by how few pineapples I've been given.